Hi everyone, I'm Jane, and today we're going to paint this breezy summer window with a jar of wildflowers. Make sure you check out the video description below for a full list of materials, and let's get started. All right, to get started, we're just going to lay in a simple background of a sky and some ground, and I'm going to use my number 12 cloud brush, but you can use a flat brush for this if you like. I just kind of like the soft look that I get from using this brush, but I'm going to be using it the same way as I would if I were using a flat brush. So I'm just gonna wet it in my jar a little bit. I don't want it soaking wet, but I just want a little bit of moisture in it. And then I'm gonna take a paper towel and just kind of squeeze a lot of that moisture out. I'm gonna take some titanium white, quite a bit, and a little bit of phthalo blue. And then I'm just gonna do kind of lazy X's back and forth all across this top part of the canvas. Don't worry about blending your colors, only worry about filling in all the little holes in the texture of the canvas. And I did wet down the back of my canvas just to give me a little extra working time so I can blend my colors together nicely. Light pressure, just barely touching, just to dust out some of those brush stroke lines. And I'm going to take this down a little higher than the midpoint of my canvas, using a little less blue each time. Just very lightly blend it in with that previous section. See how I start right below it? And then with lighter pressure, work up into it so they blend. And I like kind of the streaky look that I get from doing this. So it kind of helps insinuate some distant, really misty clouds. I'm only going to pick up white now for this bottom section. There's still a little bit of blue on my brush. All right, now I'm going to load up with yellow. Notice I didn't clean off my brush. Still have some white in there. And then a bit of blue. Maybe I'm gonna grab just a little more white because I want this area for the ground to blend into our sky just a little bit. Helps create some distance. So light pressure there to get it blending with the sky. Heavier pressure to lay down the paint. Lighter pressure there to blend. Now, as I bring this color down, I'm going to pick up a little more blue as I go. But you don't have to get too specific with it here because we're going to cover up a lot of this anyway. I'm kind of arcing it on the sides just a little bit to help create some movement in our ground so it's not just a flat ground. So see now with the difference in the colors here, we've created some distance with the horizon being pale and faded into the sky. And then the lighter and darker areas through here help indicate that our ground is dynamic. It's not solid and flat. It's got some little dips and hills and rises. All right, now I'm gonna take my number 8 filbert, and this is one of the brushes in my line, and they are in production now, so they'll be available very, very soon. I'm gonna grab some of this blue, mix it with some yellow, just get a green color. It doesn't matter if it matches anything in here. It doesn't matter if it's totally different. I'm gonna add just a little bit of white to it. And I'm gonna come in here and just kind of start touching in a bush. Now I'm not gonna put it right on my horizon because this horizon is faded out, so it's very, very distant. I'm gonna choose an area a little bit closer that's gonna help push that horizon farther back. So I'm gonna just come in here and just start kind of touching in different directions, sometimes flat, sometimes on the edge. Just kind of create a little bit of a bush or something in there. And since my background is still wet, I'm picking up a little bit of that, and I can dust out the bottom. Every time I mix up more for a new bush, I'm going to mix my color just a little bit different. Go a little more yellow on this one. And I make them different shapes and sizes, make them overlap each other a bit. We're not going to get too detailed with these bushes. They're really just there to kind of help fill the void. They're not going to be the focal point. Notice I didn't worry about taking the bushes all the way to the edge over here, because again, that's going to be covered up by the frame of our window. So that doesn't matter. Just lightly dusting it out. My paint is still wet because I wet down the back of my canvas. And over here, maybe I'll do one more. We'll go a little bit taller with this one. Just take it down to wherever you want it to end. And let's see, we got a pretty light color there. Just gonna mix up something kind of similar and just kind of dust out the bottom of that. If you don't like that line there, you can just kind of go back over it and break it up just a little bit. Now I'm gonna take a fan brush, wet it in my jar, and on a paper towel, I'm gonna dry it off. Kind of swirl it around because I want the bristles to kind of break apart like that. And let's make some little wildflowers, some little yellow wildflowers that are kind of growing in there. It's all right if I pick up a little bit of that green. So I'm just gonna kind of touch into that yellow, get the paint down roughly 1/4 of an inch, almost halfway down my bristles. Try really hard to keep them separated like that. And then I'm gonna come into my white and just kind of touch the very ends. We're gonna start in the distance here. Now you wanna be very careful that you don't just and plop this down on there. You just wanna lightly just touch the very ends. So we're just gonna kind of do that throughout here. Kind of roll to the edge of the angle brush a little bit. Don't always just use the center. And as your paint starts to dissipate, you can go back up a little bit farther because that'll help them look like they're fading out into the distance. I'm going to create a little bit of a path with these yellow flowers. So I'm going to kind of bring them this way and back this way. And as it comes forward, it's going to widen a bit. And I'm not going to fill that whole area in solid with the yellow flowers because we're going to add some other stuff too. So just lightly touching, using the edge of the brush, the middle, the other edge, and bring it over. And as we start getting closer to the bottom, you can start putting a little more pressure on your brush to get some bigger flowers. So there, I'm putting a little bit more pressure. And it's starting to get kind of a look like there's some stems in there. See, almost about half pressure there. And I really like that look. When you load up with fresh paint, don't put full pressure on right away. Just lightly tap until the paint's almost gone, and then you can start putting the heavier pressure on the brush. And again, I'm not gonna worry about going all the way down because that's gonna be covered. Cleaned off my brush, separate the bristles again. And let's mix up a green color. So I'm gonna use quite a bit of paint. See how I'm kind of stroking through there. And we'll go into the blue, but I'm not mixing it real well, so it's still kind of marbled. And maybe I'll do that in the white just a little bit. So I've got a nice variation of color on here. And let's start right in here. Super light pressure there. We're gonna do it pretty much the same way as we did the little flowers. As I come over here, remember, because my brush strokes go up, so are my strokes that I'm doing here. I'm not gonna do it straight across like that. Get some of that into there. And I'm putting about half to full pressure here. Overlap your flowers just a little bit here and there. Take that up the side. Notice I'm not really going beyond the bushes. We might do that in a minute, but I want to make sure that my color is light, very light. If I take this dark color in there, it's gonna look weird. This color is quite a bit darker than what we have going on back there. Just flip your brush over when it starts to run out of your paint. All right, let's grab a little more white and our yellow, and we'll mix up a nice light color. Now we can come in here, super light pressure. That color's just barely gonna show, and that's what we want. We're just gonna kind of tap it until it kind of disappears. I'm even kind of digging up because this paint is still a little bit wet. So what I'm doing is taking the tip of the brush, touching it, just barely touching, and kind of flicking up ever so lightly. Because we don't want to be able to see individual blades of grass. We just want a hint that they're back there. I'm actually going to add just a few more yellow flowers, and then we'll move on. All right, I'm going to go back to my number 6 filbert, and I have some quinacridone and deep violet. And we're gonna make some flowers, but you can use any colors you like for the flowers, whatever you wanna see. So I'm gonna grab some quinacridone and a little bit of white. Really just pick the white up on one side. That way I can get some variation in my flowers. Now this little area here that's kind of blank, I think I wanna put some flowers there. I'm gonna do that very similar to the way I did the bushes here. Maybe just not as big. So I'm just gonna kind of start touching. Turn my brush a little every time. Just make a little shape in here. If your green is still quite wet and you're picking some of that up, then just let that part dry before you do this. I'm not getting too much of it. I'll just take a few up the hill here. Just wipe that off. I'm gonna be super messy today. Grab some deep violet and a little bit of white. And maybe we'll do some here. Cleaned off my brush, get some of that green again. Still a little hint of white, there was some white right there. And we'll just add some little foliage to the bottom here. Just kind of hide where those flowers start. See, it's really just the same thing as what we did on those distant bushes. Just kind of covering up the base of those flowers. It's picking up a little bit of that pink color, but I'm not worried about that. If you're picking up too much of it and it's getting muddy, just let it dry and then go back over it. Now notice I didn't add any flowers over here, and that's because we're gonna have our jar of flowers right here, and I just don't want it to get too busy. This area will be a little bit more visible. If you want something a little bit more going on back here, you can take your fan brush and just super lightly touch in some of those colors. And maybe I'll do that real quick. I'm gonna do it the same way I did these little grasses. Just be super careful that you don't overdo it back there. So I'm just picking up a tiny bit of my quinacridone, and I'll get just a tiny bit of white, kind of wiping off a lot of it. And we'll just come in back here. I'm just using the corner of my angle brush. There we go, that's not too bad. Just give a hint of that color back there. And maybe just a little bit of the deep violet. The deep violet and the quinacridone mix really well together, so I'm not being too worried about washing off my brush when I go from one color to the next. Let's add just a little bit of that here in front of this bush. Put the tiniest bit more pressure on my brush here. All right, we're gonna start on our window frame. Now I have burnt umber, Mars black, raw umber, and a tiny bit of unbleached titanium. Now, whenever we paint wood, I get a lot of questions about, can I use this color or this color? There's so many different types of wood. You can use any colors that you like. You don't have to use the same colors I'm using. I'm taking my burnt umber and mixing it in with a bit of black just to get a nice dark color. And I'm using my 5/8 inch angle brush. If all you have is a 1/2 inch, that's perfectly fine. So what I'm gonna do is place my hand on the edge of my canvas at the top. This is gonna help me draw a straight line. Now, if you're still not comfortable doing this, wait until this is all dry and you can lay some tape on here to paint in your line. But I'm gonna plant my hand firmly on my canvas, place my brush so it's about 1 inch from the top, and just drag my arm across. And the fact that my hand is planted on top of my canvas is gonna help me get a straighter line. But it's an old wood window, so if it's a little bit wonky or wobbly, that's okay. And I'm just gonna fill that in. All right, same thing on the edge here. I'm gonna put my hand right on my canvas as my pinky's resting right on the edge. Go about 1 inch out from the edge and just let my arm fall straight down. Notice I'm not doing this to draw the line. That's not gonna help me get a straight line. The movement is all in my shoulder. It's just my shoulder. So my arm and my wrist and my hand are stationary, and it's just my shoulder that's bending with my pinky on the edge. So that helps it come straight down. Ooh, we got a little crazy there. That's okay. We'll just come out a little tiny bit farther. Much better. Now on this side, if you need, you can flip your canvas upside down. I'm fairly confident in drawing a straight line, so I'm just gonna do it. Across the bottom, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put my pinky so it's kind of braced against the bottom edge of my canvas. I'm going to come up about 2 inches here for the windowsill and just drag my arm across. I know this dark color is kind of scary compared to the bright background. This dark color looks really out of place, but this is just the base for our wood color. We're not going to leave it dark like this. All that green is still wet, so it's pulling in just a little bit, but that's fine. All right, I'm going to go to my 1/2 inch angle brush, and I have a little matte medium. Now, you don't have to use matte medium here, but I think that you're going to have an easier time getting the look that you want very easily if you do use it. So I'm going to load up with some matte medium. I'm going to come into my raw umber, drag some out, a little scrape of this unbleached titanium, and maybe just a tiny bit more matte medium on top. So notice I didn't mix any of them. Even the matte medium is completely separate. And what that's gonna do is help kind of float these colors through each other and on top of this color we laid down, even though this dark color is still wet. So I'm gonna take the angle of my brush and we're gonna give the window like a mitered edge. You know, rather than drawing a line up here or just letting it be continuous, we're gonna give that angle from this corner to that corner. So I'm gonna take the tip of my brush and just touch. Just like that. And then I can come from that line and start dragging it down. And as I drag it, see, I twist my brush just a little, twist it back, all the way down until that color kind of stops. Let's grab just a bit more. And we'll do the same thing up here. We're just doing a very simple wood grain here. You just want this to look like an old window. You can take your brush with super light pressure and just go over it to smooth anything out that you feel like is too much. So see, we're starting to get a look just like some old wood. And you can keep adding this and get it as light as you want it to be. I'm gonna take a little more in this dark area. This is the mix of those 2 browns and the matte medium. Just kind of streak it through there, light pressure, to get rid of brush lines and streak them together. Let's add a little more of that light color in here. And then we'll do the same thing in this corner and across the top. So I'm just touching from that corner all the way to that corner to draw a line, and then light pressure, kind of letting my brush wobble and twist it just a little bit till that color kind of runs out. Now without the matte medium, if you're painting on top of wet color like I am, then your paints are probably gonna blend together a little bit more and you won't get so much of the streakiness. If your dark color is dry and you're not using the matte medium, then you're really just gonna kind of cover it. And, you know, I mean, it depends on the look that you're going for. If you're happy with the way that looks, that's perfectly fine. I'm really digging this kind of streaky effect. And I'm gonna do the same thing across the top. All right, on the bottom, I'm gonna pick up more of the unbleached titanium because I want it a little bit lighter here. That's gonna tell us that the sun is up and maybe it's shining down onto our windowsill. Now I'm gonna miter these edges as well. I'm gonna come from that corner out to the edge here. I'm not going to take it down to this corner. But at about roughly the same angle as the ones up in the top. So I'm going to do the same thing. If you get something that's too light, you just pick up a little more of your dark color and streak into it. And you could even pick up the brown black if you wanted to. All right, now I'm going to pick up brown black. I didn't clean off my brush. And here, just about the bottom inch, I'm just going to take that brown black across. I'm not worried about blending it with this lighter color. I'm not worried about making a hard line. We're just making a dark area. So it can either seem like the window ledge is long and as it comes into the building, it gets a shadow on it, or maybe it's a cut edge that's facing you. Whatever you want it to be. All right, so now this is dry, pretty dry, and I want to brighten that a bit. So this is part of the beauty of matte medium. You can make that very, very easy to take a wet color and make it look like it's blending in with a dry color, even though it's not. So I'm going to load up with some matte medium and some unbleached titanium. A little more matte medium on the top of it. And my black brown again, just to get rid of that line. All right, I'm going to dry that one more time because I am going to use some chalk and I want to draw on top of it, but not while it's wet. All right, so our canvas is dry, the background here as well, and I've just got this piece of white sidewalk chalk. And I'm going to start drawing our jar. So I'm going to start up here. I'm going to make it, I don't know, about 4 inches tall or so. You can make it as large as you want. And I'm just going to bring that straight down. An easy way to tell if you're making it straight down is to follow the line of your window here. Now, if your window isn't straight, then your jar won't be straight either. But if your window's pretty straight, you can follow that edge. I'm going to come over roughly about 5 inches. I want this to be a nice wide jar. And straight down. And notice I did go down into my windowsill a bit. We'll put a straight across top on there. And since this is chalk and it's all going to wash off and we're going to paint over it, you can really sketch around on here until you get it exactly the way you want it. For the top, I'm going to come in about 1 inch and make a line about 1 inch tall, roughly. And the same thing on this side. And a line across the top. So all I'm going to do is cut this corner off, just make it a little rounded. I'm going to get over here so I can see. So just kind of a curve from one side to the other. And then the same thing here. We don't want this corner to be hard. We want it to be kind of curved like that. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. This isn't so deep of a curve that it's going to make our jar look round. We're just cutting those hard corners off. Now I'm going to use my matte medium again, and in this part, I feel like you're gonna have a much easier time if you use matte medium. Using the paint without it is gonna make the paint more opaque and you'll lose kind of that transparent glass look. So I'm gonna get just a little bit of my Phthalo Blue, and I'm gonna come over here and mix it into my matte medium until it's quite transparent. Now I'm not gonna draw a line all the way around my jar. I'm just gonna come over here and just kind of start adding some little highlights. And I'm using the Phthalo Blue because, you know, a lot of times these old jars kind of have that blue look. The glass looks a little blue. Right here, remember, this is a curved area all the way across. It's not just curved on the edges here. The jar would be curved right here too. So to say that that jar is curved, we're gonna come here and kind of swoop it over to the side. Now, if you get a spot that's got too hard of edges, just come in and pick up a little matte medium on its own and just swipe over those hard edges before it dries. And I'm gonna add a bit of this blue all over the jar and start giving it some shape. Always your brush strokes follow the shape of the jar. You can have a hard edge right on the edge of the jar. That's perfectly fine. We're gonna do a couple layers on this jar. So don't worry about making it look like the finished product just yet. Let's go just a little bit deeper with that blue in a couple of spots. Then we'll add a little bit of white. All right, a tiny bit of white and matte medium. Remember, the titanium white is very, very strong, so if you get too much of it in here, then you're gonna have some really opaque parts. And we are gonna put some white on here that is more opaque, but we're gonna save that for the last layer after we've done our flowers. So let's just add a few little streaks in here. I'm barely touching the canvas, just kind of letting that color dust over. That is too hard of a line for me, so I just pick up some matte medium and immediately go over it. All right, that's a pretty good start for our jar. We'll come back after we add the flowers and the stems because the reflections would be covering the stems a little bit. And we'll really make that jar pop with some of its highlights, but that's a good place to start. All right, now I'm gonna take my number 6 round brush and I'm gonna load up with some quinacridone. We're just gonna make some pretty simple flowers in here. We're gonna start with the centers. And I don't want the centers to end up being this color, but it's fine. It's a good place to start. We're gonna end up painting in some details on those anyway. So I'm gonna start with 3 flowers in this color. I'm just going to draw the center, and they don't have to be perfect circles. I think that the way they're angled is going to help you determine where your flower is angled. So since that's a little more squished than round, to me that says the flower is going to be facing this way just a little bit. If we have one here that's kind of flat on the bottom and domed on the top, then that tells me my flower is going to be pointing up. I'm going to do another one right here, right at the edge of the jar. And we'll make this one round, so this flower's facing us. And we will add some more flowers besides those. Let's just start there. So I'm going to take my quinacridone and we're going to start doing some petals. Now to do the petals, all I'm going to do is start in the center. I'm going to put some pressure on my brush and drag it down. And as I drag it, see how I'm kind of rolling the brush back and forth in my hands. And that gives it that wiggly look. So basically what I'm doing is this. I'm pushing, and as I bring it back, I'm bringing it up so it gets more tapered, but I'm kind of rolling it so that it gets that wiggly look. But if you don't like the wiggly look, if you like the very smooth petals, then just don't twist the brush as you bring it around. This side of the flower is closest to us, since I've decided that the flower is kind of facing this way a little bit. So as we come around toward this area, the petals are going to get just a little bit shorter. So it's just turned away from us a little. Now I'm going to come into my white, and I just pulled out just a little bit. And we're going to go over that again, doing the exact same thing, kind of twisting around on it. That just gives us a little bit of some highlight in there. Sometimes flower petals have those streaks of color, and so that's kind of what we're going for. Don't worry about if you go into your center too far. Now before I move on to each flower, I'm going to clean off my brush. Let's do some petals on this one. This one is facing us, so my petals are pretty much going to be the same length all the way around. Now if you have two flowers that are close to each other, don't try and keep the petals separate. If you have to take a petal over top of the flower next to it, that's perfectly okay. Sometimes in a flower arrangement, the flowers would overlap and touch a little bit, so just let that happen. Now the centers like this, where it's flat on the bottom and domed on the top, you can do them a couple different ways, and I'm going to show you both. We're going to start with a very open flower. You can have it be quite open or closed like a bud, and let's do this one quite open. So to make it look like it's very open, we're going to come from the bottom of the shape and bring the petals down. And maybe I'll even come in here between some of these and just add a couple that are looking like they're poking from the other side of the flower. Now before we add our purple flowers, I'm going to take this long liner brush and get some burnt umber, maybe a little matte medium so that it flows nicely. And maybe I'll take just a hint of black in there. And I'm going to make a little stick for some yellow flowers. So I'm just going to start somewhere. Maybe we'll start here. It's going to come up from behind this flower. And make our little stick come up like that. Make sure it goes all the way to this flower so that it looks like it's coming up from behind it. And back out this side. And we'll take it down into our jar. Just kind of a curly, wild little stick. And we'll give it a few little offshoot branches here and there. Some of them can come in front of your flowers if you want. Wow, I can't speak today. I'm not going to add too terribly much detail to this stick. And I want to add some little yellow flowers to that stick. So I'm going to come into my white with my round brush, and just somewhere on the stick, I'm going to take the point of my brush and push down. I'll just give it a little 4 or 5 petals. And then we can come in and grab some yellow and do the same thing. So we've got some little yellow white flowers. I'm going to add a few on the stick and then we'll move on. I think I'm going to go through and do the white on all of them before and then come back and do the yellow so I don't have to clean my brush off in between each flower. Maybe here I'll just add a little bud right on the end. And maybe here too. All right, I'm going to dip straight down into my brown and just get a little bit of it right on the point of my brush. I'm going to come in and just kind of add a couple of little dots to the center of these flowers. All right, let's add our purple flowers. So I'm going to do this pretty much the same way as I did the pink flowers. If you want, you can change the shape of these flowers, make them look like totally different types of flowers, or you can have them be exactly the same and they'll just look like different colors of the same type of flowers. I think I'm going to take a little bud out this way. So I'm going to, just a smaller one. So it's domed on the top and flat on the bottom. Let's take one over here. Kind of an oval. I'm going to let it overlap my wood frame a bit. And let's do one here and we'll just let it overlap this flower. Let's do our petals. So here, this one's going to be a bud. I'm still going to come from the bottom, press, but I'm going to bring it up over the top. And I think I am going to do these petals just a little bit shorter than the red ones. And And we'll get some white and add the little highlights. All right, let's add some stems. So I've got my number 5 round brush, just a little bit smaller. I'm gonna mix up some green. And I'm not gonna worry about adding a highlight just yet. We're just gonna block in where our stems are. Now we don't have to get real specific with these stems. It's kind of a cluster of flowers, and you might not be able to trace, you know, with your eye where this stem goes and where it comes out and where it ends in the jar. Let's start with this little guy here, and we're gonna give him a little bit of a little place where he attaches to the stem. I might even bring that up into the flower just a little bit. And we'll bring that down. It ends there. That's pretty much what we're gonna do, and then we'll just add some stems into the jar. So when you're adding a stem to a flower like this, don't just try and come out from between 2 petals, because that may not be where it comes from. With your brush, hold it up so that your brush is directly in the center of the flower, and see where it comes out. And this one actually looks like the stem would kind of come out from behind this petal, right about in here. So we're just gonna bring that down a bit and just let it disappear behind that flower. Same thing with this one here. We'll hold our brush right through the center there and see, and it looks like it's gonna come out right about there. And then in our jar, we'll just add a few stems, trying to make sure that we've got as many stems as we have flowers. A lot of these stems are just going to be suggested once we're done with the jar, you know, because we're going to add some more highlights to it. Now the stems that are poking out, I'm going to grab a little more yellow and a little hint of white. And we'll just come along the edge of it and just add a bit of a highlight. We're just suggesting a highlight. That's about it. We can add some leaves. I'm actually gonna go back to my number 6 round brush. Mix up some green. Grab a little hint of white. And let's decide maybe there's a leaf right here. So I'm gonna push and twist a little and release my pressure. Just a very simple small leaf. And you can put the leaves wherever you want. They can be poking out from behind a flower. They can be attached to your stem, whatever you want to do. We can even put one in the jar. Maybe there's one growing on this stem that's inside of the jar. I like that. I think I'll add a couple. Let's set our flower centers while we wait for the jar to dry. I'm going to load it up with burnt umber. Quite a bit, using my number 6 round, and we're going to fill this in. Now these ones that are kind of facing away, I'm going to draw around the leaves there because I want to keep that texture. See how I kind of went around the petals rather than just making a circle and cutting that off. I think it looks a little more natural like that. I'm going to show you how I'm going to fill in all of these centers, and then I'm just going to put you in time lapse and do them all really quick. But let's make sure you can see that one first. So I just fill it in with brown, and my paint is pretty heavy here. And I like that because it's going to help give a bit of texture, but also pull all of the colors kind of together. I cleaned off my brush, and I'm going to get a little hint of quinacridone, mix it in with my yellow, get a nice bright orange. And we'll just come in here and kind of tap right at the top edge. See how it's kind of picking up that brown and layering the colors together. Just gonna wipe that off, get some yellow, and do the same thing. Not covering quite as much with the yellow as I did with the other colors though. And now a little bit of white. And again, I'm not covering quite as much with the white as I even did with the yellow. Just dotting it on there. So I'm gonna put you into time lapse and I'm gonna fill in these other centers. All right, let's get rid of these chalk lines. So I just have a very slightly damp brush. All I'm gonna do is just wipe over that, and it takes the chalk right off. Now we can get a better idea of the shape of our jar. And you can make any adjustments here. So if there's something you did that you don't like, you can change that here. All right, my number 6 filbert again. I'm gonna grab some titanium, and I'm gonna pick up a little bit more than I did before, but I'm still gonna mix it in with some matte medium. Not as much matte medium as before. See, that kind of gives you an idea of how transparent it is when I wipe it on that green. And I want it just a little less transparent than that. Now we can come in here and really start playing with these highlights. I want a nice bright one right there, but I don't want a hard line. So I picked up a little more matte medium, and I'm just gonna streak over that line to soften it. Now, you don't want to take any of your highlights over your petals, but you do want to take it over the stems and leaves in here. Now, up in here where I've got my flowers hanging over the edge, I don't want to lose my jar completely, so I am still going to come in here very carefully between my petals and create some little lines that say the threads of the jar are back there. I'm going to take a little of my quinacridone and mix it in my medium and add just a couple highlights of the pink to say that the flowers are kind of reflecting on the jar. I'm not going to get too crazy with the pink, just a little bit. You could add the purple too, but I think that with as transparent as this is, there's not gonna be a lot of difference between the quinacridone and the purple, so I'm only gonna add one, but you can do whatever you like. Now I'm just gonna take a little bit of titanium on my damp brush, no medium, and I'm just gonna add just a few points of some really bright highlight. So right there at the threads, maybe right here, because I feel like this edge is kind of getting lost. Notice I'm using my filbert, I'm using the tip of it. I'm not using it flat here. All right, I'm gonna grab a little more phthalo blue and mix it with my matte medium. And we are gonna write Mason on here. I was gonna write Ball, but that's a brand name, and so I thought maybe I better not do that. So I'm just using a small round brush. If your line breaks a little bit, that's okay. And now some white. And I'm just gonna use just a tiny bit of matte medium just to help it flow a little bit better. All right, we're gonna do one more thing and we're done. I'm gonna use my 5/8 inch angle brush. You could use a flat brush or even a 1/2 inch here. I'm gonna grab a bit of white. Try not to get any of those other colors that I have mixed in with it. And I'm gonna mix it with some matte medium. And we are gonna create a sheer curtain here. That's kind of blowing in the breeze. So I'm gonna start it right up here. I'm gonna use the edge of my angle brush. And remember, when you use it like that, the tip always drags because you don't wanna crush up into it. And I'm gonna bring a line down that's kind of blowing. A little more matte medium. Now I'm using my brush flat. And I'm gonna go over that line. If you have a piece of the line that won't go away and you really want it to go away, turn your brush on its edge and that will kind of carve it out. And I'm just gonna keep on picking up matte medium until this color is pretty much gone and I'm putting almost no pressure on my brush. If you get some parts that kind of overlap and create a more opaque area, like right there, I think that's okay. This is a curtain, very sheer curtain, and where it folds over itself, you might have a little bit more of that color. I'm gonna add a couple other little areas like that. Right in here, we can kind of do whatever we want. Use that until it fades out. I'm not filling in everything with this super transparent color, but most of it. I don't want just a big solid white curtain. All right, now I have the shape of my curtain. We are just about done. I'm just gonna grab a little bit more white, just mix it in with the medium that's already on my brush. And some of these edges, I'm gonna make a little bit brighter. Just like that. And then just dust back that line. And there's your breezy summer window. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I really appreciate you guys painting with me each week. When I started my channel 2 years ago this month, I had no idea the things that I would experience. I didn't know that I would gain as many subscribers as I have, that I would have people all over the world sharing their art with me and telling me their stories, that I would have my very own line of paintbrushes. None of that was even a thought in my mind when I uploaded my very first video 2 years ago. And I owe every bit of that to you guys, so thank you. Speaking of paintbrushes, there is a link in the video description below that takes you to my website where you can currently get the cloud and the flat brushes, but the detail brushes are on order right now, so they will be available on my website in the next few weeks. While you're on my website, make sure that you check out my social buttons and follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook so that you can share your version of this painting and any others that you do with me. Thank you as always for painting with me, everyone, and I'll see you next time.